Welcome to the 2024 BPL Africa Connect Business Forum in partnership with First Capital Bank. Up next is a panel discussion on Winning Today and Beyond, sponsored and brought to you by Econet. Please welcome on stage our moderator, Roy Chimanikere, Deputy CEO at Econet Wireless. Please welcome on stage Dr. Divine Simbi Ndlugula, Founder and Managing Director of Securico and Zwikomorero Farms. Please welcome on stage Peter Vowles, UK Ambassador to Zimbabwe. Please welcome on stage Douglas Hoto, Group Chief Executive Officer at First Mutual Holdings Limited. Please welcome on stage Peter Vowles, UK Ambassador to Zimbabwe. Please welcome on stage Dr. James Moria, Group CEO of Centum Investment.
I must say I've been to many conferences, but I think this one is really top draw in terms of the quality that we've received. I think for me what stood out is as Zimbabweans we tend to be very inward looking, and we spend a lot of time discussing the problems that we encounter on a day-to-day basis, and I think a lot of our public platforms are driven that way. What is unique about this platform is we're talking about enthusing and energizing topics about how we can move forward not only as businesses but as the nation. And as we listened to the Deputy Minister give his brief on what is happening within the thinking in the government space, you can see that policymakers are also thinking progressively and in a forward-looking way. We would like to conduct a conversation this afternoon, and I really call it a conversation, and it's really to draw out some of the major themes that have come out from the conversations that we've been having in the morning and the presentations that we've had from our speakers. And as you can see, we've got quite a distinguished panel, which includes not only the business side, but also the ambassador coming from a sort of a nation-to-nation perspective and looking at how we as Zimbabweans can also look at things a bit differently. And I'd like to really acknowledge our colleagues from far and beyond who've come in to give us perspectives coming from their different countries. I think it's really, as a business leader, sometimes when you look at your own challenges and the things that you face within your particular geography, you think they're unique and you think that sometimes they're insurmountable. But when you realize that in every context, everyone is dealing with different challenges. And I really liked, Ahmed, the way you gave your presentation and you really spoke from an experiential perspective about the kind of things that you have seen. To start off the conversation, I will start, Ambassador, with you. Because one of the conversations or critical conversations that took place this morning was from James, and he was talking to us about some of the business opportunities they have in Kenya and how the Kenyan government has come alongside private sector to develop a way in which private and government can work together. My first question for you is, in your particular context within the UK, how are businesses and government working together, and how has government created an enabling environment for public-private partnerships? In other words, how has government created a non-threatening, conducive environment for businesses to be able to contribute effectively towards nation building and to be able to further what I would call brand UK? And I like the fact that James was representing Brand Kenya, and I think he did really well at doing that. And as we go out as businesses, we want to really represent Brand Zimbabwe. How has the UK furthered the interests of its own businesses to represent the brand that is the United Kingdom? So over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on this panel. I'm probably the least qualified as a diplomat and a civil servant rather than a captain of industry. So I guess from a British perspective, I guess the first thing to say is how much the government needs the private sector to fulfill its democratic mandate. It needs to be able to deliver services to its people, and it needs the private sector. And I guess sometimes in the past, we go through cycles in the UK, but sometimes in government there's a allergy or an allergic reaction to business and to profit. And I think we need to keep coming through that and recognise that it's important. The role of the private sector in helping governments fulfil their democratic mandate, delivering for people, is crucial. And I think when you see that, when you start seeing some of the major projects that happen in the UK, they are collaborations. If you look at how we built Heathrow Terminal 5, it was you wouldn't necessarily know who was in there, whether they were private sector, whether they were government. You had that completely fused operating model between bringing different expertise. And the Department of Transport was in there, as were big construction companies. And that total fused implementation model, where you treat a project as an organisation in itself, is a key part of being able to deliver together for whatever it is a government wants to deliver. So that's sort of starting point. We have to move beyond the government contracts to government and private sector work together, collaborate as a unit, as a single unit to deliver things for the country. Maybe I'll talk about this separately in a kind of UK Zim perspective, but I guess that's a starting point in terms of really seeing the private sector as part of our ability to deliver.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Maybe going just one level deeper, I'll stick with you for just for a little bit on this particular topic. There was in the presentation that Lionel did on a billion reasons to believe. I'll pick out 2 points which I'd like to tease out with you. One thing that Lionel showed was the GDP of the UK versus the GDP of Africa. Then he showed the population of the UK versus the population of Africa. And what you see is that the GDP is almost similar, but from a population perspective, there is a vast difference in terms of the number of people that are on the African continent. Perhaps talk about your nation building in terms of your history and what you believe have been some of the foundational things that have driven you to that point. So that's my first part of that question.
Sounds like a PhD in itself.
Oh, yes. You answer in whatever way you put it, be great for us. And then the second thing is the critical, what everybody has been saying, one of the billion reasons we need to believe is that Africa is a demographic dividend. And in the future, as we go into 2030, 2050 and beyond, a lot of the labor force that the world has is going to come from Africa. How is the UK, in terms of policy, thinking about benefiting from that demographic dividend? And how is business in the UK sort of thinking about integrating or engaging with Africa within that particular perspective?
The first part is challenging. I'm not sure. I think, and obviously there's lots of sensitive and difficult parts of our economic growth in the UK and how we grew and how we benefited from our colonial history. And I guess that gets quite complicated and quite difficult, but it's important to recognise the historical industrialisation of the UK and many other countries, both in terms of our role in the world, but also how our kind of carbon-fueled growth and the impact collectively that is having on, and as we see even today in terms of climate change here in Zimbabwe and across the region. But I think thinking sort of forward, look, we've got the UK has an aging population, a relatively sort of declining population in the sense that our sort of average family sizes are smaller than they were, 1.7 I think now, per family, so it's a smaller and an aging population. And that's the same across a lot of Europe. And yet you've got in Africa, you have this huge dynamic population where I can't remember all the statistics, but the numbers of people that will be on this continent and the huge opportunity that there is there for the continent. And for us as the UK, looking at that, thinking, how do we think about this as a mutually beneficial? So the opportunity of intra-Africa trade as a way of spurring and catalysing Africa's growth. And conscious as a foreigner talking about Africa as a unit, obviously the diversity is important. But I think the things that we will continue to do, well, continue to see as in our interests are how do we support Africa's growth ambitions? How do we support the integration, particularly the Africa Continental Free Trade Area? And we finance the Secretariat. We actively think how can we support that? How we can co-finance elements of regional integration, because that will be in Africa's long-term interest, but also ours. That if Africa is able to trade, intertrade, in a way that is comparable to other economies around the world, that will be fantastic for this continent and for the individual countries and for Zimbabwe within that. But if we can, and then that for us that creates a huge market, but it also creates a source of imports as well. So we have to keep seeing things. I think sometimes in the UK government we see things through the lens of sort of. You can see things through the lens of attracting inward investment into the UK, and of course that is important. But we also want to see UK investment on the continent, and we want to see continental imports into Britain. That fuel, and we know that's beneficial for us. We get great quality products, but it's also beneficial for countries exporting in terms of earning forex. Creating jobs, etc. So that's why we have, for most of the continent now, have duty-free, quota-free access to UK markets. That continue, and that's fixed beyond. However, for Zimbabwe, for instance, whenever Zimbabwe becomes middle income, upper middle income, those duty-free, quota-free tariffs will remain because we see that as a long-term trajectory that we want to trade together. We see it's mutually beneficial.
Yeah. Pastor, thank you very much. I'll move over to James. And James, your presentation, you focused a lot on your partnership between as a private player with government. So I'll just, move to a private sector view of that particular theme. What advice would you give to Zimbabwean businesses about how to engage with government, with the political space, as far as nation building and economic prosperity is concerned, to build a platform for economic prosperity? Because we have a lot of executives here in Zimbabwe who really interact with some of our colleagues in the political space. And because you're from the outside, I think you're free to say anything you want. And as Hugo said, Hugo says, no one is going to follow you home. So you can give us your unfettered advice on how to manage this, but also talk to us about the real practical difficulties you encounter when you get into those relationships, when you're engaging with government, because we really want to get a very practical view of how this works and how we change the way we think, our mindsets around it, but also realizing where the difficulties are, because I'm sure colleagues in government may be listening, and it's important for them to recognize some of the challenges we face as well.
Thank you for that question. In the UK, my experience has been ultimately, whether you are a private sector leader or a public sector leader, you want to succeed. And everyone wants success. And what I found we can do better, like my colleagues in the private sector, is when you communicate with somebody in the government, try and put your signed. So just like Zimbabwe has access, duty-free, quota-free access to the UK, if you go now to business and ask them, what does that mean? Sometimes they're not clear what that means. And so we've been working closely with the government to break it down so that then business people understand, and we help open up the market opportunity beyond just Africa, to Africa being a base for the global marketplace. Because the UK is, as you saw, the GDP is similar to Africa, and it's a single market. You also have a similar large economy in the EU, which if you can access, those markets are many times the size of the African continent, but sometimes the information is just not there.
Perspective, and I like the examples you shared where there are success stories to tell of how you've partnered with government. And I like the fact, when you say put yourself in someone else's shoes when you're communicating to them. And I think it's something that we as business leaders need to understand about our engagements with government, because I think sometimes, we come with our fancy PowerPoint presentations and we think, we can bludgeon the argument into our colleagues. So thank you very much for that perspective. Ahmed, moving to you, I think what I loved about your presentation is how you earthed it in real stories of real life events that you participated in, not things that you read in a book or a case study, but that you actually lived yourself as a CEO and using that as a platform to coach other CEOs. From your practical perspective, coaching CEOs across the globe, what do you feel that it is something that CEOs receive very well? In other words, the whole coaching principle of CEOs, because I was speaking to some, one of the questions I was getting is, I didn't believe that CEOs actually need coaching. I thought CEOs had arrived, they know what they know. And do you find that they are receptive, they absorb what and actually implement the things that you're talking about? And perhaps talk to us, just in your general experience of coaching maybe as an industry, if I can put it that way, how you feel, it's being adopted, just as a platform for Zimbabwean businesses to say, is this something that we should be seeing more and more of within our context? Lastly, is it only for CEOs? What if I am a business leader, but I'm not a CEO, or I am a civil servant, for example? Can I also get coaching and is it relevant in that context?
Sure, thank you. Thanks for the question. Four-part question, if I understand it correctly.
You must earn your fees for and the lunch.
I'll start by adding something to the previous answer. I think we run into trouble, either private to private, public to public, public to private, when goals are not aligned. So you talked about bludgeoning, right? What's the point? It will never move forward. So in any kind of relationship, be it whichever kind of connection, I would advise to find what is relevant to the party you want to work with, what's relevant to you, and there will always be a common ground. So I just wanted to add to the great answer before. So your four-part question. So is coaching important was one of the questions. Perhaps you can take me through the four parts again.
So one, coaching as an industry, how is it going?
Okay.
Basically as an industry. Are CEOs receptive when you go into coaching situations? Is it relevant in every context for the different types of leaders that might be there, who might want to receive coaching? And just your general perspective and experience in terms of whether it would be relevant within our context for the the people within this room.
So coaching as an industry, I think everyone knows it's booming. In the US, it's exploding. In Europe, it's exploding. I've had a coach on and off, mostly on, since I was 26 years old. I don't think I would have achieved what I achieved, whatever that means, if I wasn't coached at such a young age. At 26 years old, I was pretty much a disaster and needed to be molded. So that helped a lot. we are specifically, we start with CEOs. They are receptive. And why, you asked, one of the questions was, what does a CEO need? I'll speak again from my personal experience. When I got my first leadership role, there was no training manual for it, right? We just got put into the job. We set some goals, we set some objectives, and we had to achieve. Case in point, so I rose up through the marketing channels, right? I was a marketer and grew and grew and grew. And I thought marketing in corporate world was the center of the universe. Little did I realize that actually logistics are the center of the universe. I learned it late, but I did learn it, and I learned that I knew nothing about it. So how do I run a company with manufacturing, with logistics, with 50 trucks, with 400 people manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Well, I was coached to learn that, because we're not dropped into a job or a role from day one with absolute expertise. And I think we would be doing a disservice if we entered a job thinking we knew everything. It could be a new role, it could be a new industry, it could be a new company, it could be one that deals with private, it could be one that deals with public. There's always something to learn. And what I hear from coaches, from people I coach, to answer that part of the question is, my God, I really needed to discuss that with somebody. And we dig deep. It's difficult. Sometimes it's painful. We ask very, very difficult questions. Get to the motivations behind why certain CEOs make the decisions they make. And we unpack that. And maybe it's the right decision, maybe it's the wrong decision. And then the part that's also important is what I talked about during the speech, is the accountability piece. Not everyone knows from day one how to be accountable, or to how to hold your team accountable. And that's a process as well. Who needs a coach? Everybody needs a coach. Name me one professional sports person who doesn't have a coach. No tennis player doesn't have a coach. No ping pong player doesn't have a coach. No swimmer doesn't have a coach. I don't know of a CEO who doesn't have a coach. So I wouldn't look at it as a remedial thing. I would look at it as a progressive growth thing. And it really does help. We saw the results. So not only CEOs, personally for the CEOs that I coach, I do go one level deeper, so to their management team. I think that's when we derive the most value, because then everything is clicking, everything is aligned. Sometimes they're not aligned, but that comes to the fore, and we can figure them out. So I may not be the coach for everyone in the company, but I think at all levels, that's why I said since I was 26, I've been coached. So yes, it is for everybody. Does that cover everything?
It does cover the question. I have another question, but not for you.
Okay.
It's for these guys in the room, and for the ladies and gentlemen in the room. How many of you have coaches? Maybe just by show of hands. Yeah. I can see a fair number, but I can also see a fair number who do not have coaches. And that's why I asked that question, because I don't believe it's something that's really taken off within the Zimbabwean market space. But having a coach myself, I've seen the benefits of coaching and what it helps you to think, how it helps you to think differently about the same problems you've been seeing every single day, but having a different mindset and different perspective to those problems. I've got lots of questions for you, but I just have one more that I'll ask you for now. Do CEOs have a life?
Do CEOs have a life?
Yeah. Do they need 800 cigars, 19 cars, 2 dogs, 2 cats? Do you generally find that CEOs actually are interesting people with personalities, and have got interests and pursuits outside billions of dollars on their?
It's a great question. It's the question of the day, actually. Of course, they have lives. They have many hobbies. I find them, a lot of them, to be adventurous. Lots of mountain climbers, lots of race car drivers, lots of out of the box kind of things. I think it's inherent in the personality. You cannot just turn off that drive when you leave the office. It just continues. Another personal story. I see it in my brother. My brother is a massive risk taker versus me, much more conservative, and that flows through his entire life.
Yes.
So with a CEO, that adventurous nature, that risk-taking nature, flows outside of the office.
Yeah. No, very, very, very interesting, because I know when we have our conversations in the offices, you know, they talk of work-life balance, and I've heard it also said that it's not work-life balance. There's nothing to balance outside of work. You know, it's just life.
It's just life.
And whether you're in work or you're in life, it's the same thing, and everything just needs to flow. But it's interesting what you say about risk-taking. I was saying to a colleague who's in this room that the more senior I've got in my organization, I find that I'm less risk-averse. I'm an accountant by training, and you're trained to be conservative, but I find that I'm willing to take more and more risk. And sometimes I say to my team, please catch me if I'm taking too much risk. I need some safeguards, you know, when I am taking risk. Yeah.
Risk is okay. We could talk about risk for a full day. I think it's what is your appetite for risk and what is the calculation of
Yes,
risk
correct.
that is key, and that's where the sounding board would be very
Yes.
useful.
No, it's very, very, very important. Dr. Divine, you are one of our local CEO experts, and I'm going to ask you a very interesting question which comes from page 257 of your book. I've not read other 256 pages, but as I was flipping through this caught my eye. Dominate, don't compete. And I'll read a little bit about it so that you know what, if you haven't read the book. It says, in the realm of business, one must not merely partake in the game, but they must strive to become the game itself. The pursuit of domination, not mere competition, is the golden rule. You must infuse your endeavors with such ubiquity that your presence echoes far and wide. Be an indomitable force that permeates every nook and cranny, leaving your competitors and your clients awestruck. So that's an excerpt from her book. Please tell us more about domination. It sounds like you're going for world domination, and would like to know more about this. As a Zimbabwean business, how do you feel that you can truly own your space in an environment which is difficult and dynamic? The rules are changing all the time. It's like you're in shifting sand. And you're competing at times, depending on the industry that you're in, against people from everywhere across the world. You know, with AI, you know, borderless competition is a thing that we really have to, to really brace for. How do you feel about dominating business within the Zimbabwean market space in the dynamic environment that we're in? So tell us more what led to you saying these words and how you shape it within the Zimbabwean context.
Okay, thank you very much, Roy. You were asking if CEOs have a life. Do you have a life?
I would like to believe that I do.
And
but
what are your pursuits outside the office?
I don't race fast cars. I
Okay.
don't have 800 cigars. But my main passion is largely centered around my church and what I
Okay.
do within my church. I can share more, but different context.
No, thank you very much. What did I mean by dominate and don't compete? I think it all began with the context is really based on my background. For me to have gotten into an industry which was considered not suitable for me at the time. So I went in, you know, when you go into a fight as an underdog, you really are going in, you know, as life or death. So when you go in as life or death, you are going to dominate eventually because you are putting your best foot forward, because you need to prove that this is your game, albeit to the thinking that it is not yours. So this is the background to domination. And to your question on what is it that in this economy or in this environment is a business, what makes the business go ahead, because it's not an easy environment, as we all know. For me, I've had to consider just a few things that would put me in a steady position for me to continue running a fairly decent business. And I think as a leader, I always say it starts with a mindset. I've had to put in my mind that anything that I put my mind on should really get to 101% success. So that's the first thing. But certainly there are certain things that I have had to attend to and that I believe every leader should really attend to. It's about the people. It's about the people. And the people are the people that can, it's a journey. And it's a journey that you cannot walk alone. It's a journey that you need people that buy into your vision, people that will believe in you, that can follow you and have the right mindset as well. And that's only when then perhaps you can thrive in an environment like Zimbabwe. The processes for me are also very important. When I started my company 25 years ago, I went in with just one thing in mind. We are going to be not necessarily the largest, but the best. And we said, how are we going to do it? We are going to benchmark against international standards. And one thing that we certain would do within 5 years of starting the business was to be certified to standards that are international. And no one had done it in the sector that I'm in. And then, of course, when we started doing it, a lot of people were questioning, why are you wasting money? Why is it so important in a guarding company to be certified to ISO 9001 and so on? But certainly it was the game changer because we knew sustainability was an issue for many organizations that were forward-looking. And that's how we have managed to thrive, because people believe in an organization that is focused on sustainability issues. This is why we are certified to 14,001 to 45,001, but we are not in the business of producing waste or producing hazards. But certainly we work in environments where that happens, and we are relevant in those businesses. We believe in that seamless integration with those businesses. But again, for me, it is about, for an environment like this, it is about maybe cultivating that culture of excellence in an organization. Anything and everything that we do or that I believe I'm doing is going to be done in the very best possible way. This is where the domination then eventually comes, because if you are good at your game, you dominate. So perhaps those are some of the areas. And in this environment, you really need to be financially savvy. You need to be very disciplined. And if you are not disciplined, you lose your business very easily and very quickly. So the financial discipline aspect is important. The value proposition to the customer. If you are providing value, no matter how difficult it is, the customers will be loyal to you. No matter perhaps how you might want to charge more, they might complain here and there, but they would want to do business with you because you are providing value in their business. So for me, that's how this environment has worked for us. It's not easy, but certainly one way or the other, I think we are not just competing, but we are dominating.
That's excellent to hear. I found those words inspiring. That's why, they immediately caught my attention, because, when we go into business, it's like you're waging a war, and you draw your lines, and you fight the war to the best possible way that you can. One thing I know about you is that you're very passionate about empowering women entrepreneurs. And I'm sure that in your own journey, you've probably experienced hurdles as you were coming through as a female entrepreneur. Talk to us a little bit about your journey, and whether how you feel about the inclusion of women within the Zimbabwean business space, particularly in the entrepreneurial side, and whether you feel that our society is inclusive, and what we could do more if you feel it's not inclusive to empower women entrepreneurs within a Zimbabwean context.
Well, I think Roy, any society that is not having their women participate in the mainstream activities of the economy are doomed to continue on this failure path. And I think Africa is one of those areas that has been noted that it's very important to get women to be participating in the mainstream and be able to own also their own means of production for many reasons that we all know. We all know that when there is a hunger in the home, the woman is the one who has got to run around to ensure that the father and the children have to eat. So certainly, for me, it's an area that I'm very passionate about. I think it's something that it's in my DNA as I grew up. You would see that there were so many disadvantages that the women or the girls that I went to school were facing. And I felt that obviously, given the opportunity, I would also want to change that kind of that narrative. So we have employed women in the security sector against every corner that my own managers that I initially employed were men, and they will tell me it cannot be done. And I said the women will be the best to be employed in some of the size that we have problems with. And obviously the clients themselves were not. So empowerment of women for me, and it indeed for having employed so many women in the business that I run, it has really also helped us in the sense that we've done well by employing more women. Actually, this is one of the reasons why we have succeeded. But mostly because they are more diligent. During that inflation period, 2007-8, a lot of men were leaving work. And but the women were ever so grateful. They stayed the course, and they diligently worked until after the whole debacle of hyperinflation. And a lot of my colleagues in the industry who, at the time when I started employing women, were telling me, no, you are going to lose money because women will ask for maternity leave. When there's a funeral in the home, they are the ones to go, this child is sick. So this is a business that you pay almost the 90% of the money to salaries, so you lose money. That's what my colleagues in the industry are saying to me. But 2008 and 9, they realized that it was actually the best business decision that I had made. But for me, it was not just about the business decision. It was also to get women to be employed formally and for them to look after their children. So for me, empowerment of women has changed the whole setup, because all these women that we are supporting, whether it's in our supply chain, whether in the organizations that I work with, that we are persuading, or rather we are working with to support women, there's been quite a serious change in terms of what is happening in the country. More children are going to work, are going to school. Obviously, there's less poverty in homes and so on. So for me, this is why I am so passionate about getting women to own their own means of production.
Fora where you are pushing for that, and I think I've been really impressed even at the quality that is coming through from some of the products and the initiatives that women-owned businesses are doing. So well done on that initiative.
Yeah. Perhaps I can also just talk about we have partnered with Econet and the other corporates as well on the woman-owned business trust, where we are linking women-owned enterprises to Econet and in many other corporates. And it is really putting a lot more money into the women's pockets. And obviously that has got a bearing on the overall economy. The nation is more empowered when more women are empowered. So we must obviously thank those that have partnered with us. And I know we did an evaluation with yourselves as Econet. And when we started this partnership last year, you guys were at 2%. And just a few months ago, 2-3 months ago, you are now at 5% of your supply chain going into women, to women enterprises. And that certainly is a lot of money that is changing, a lot of communities out there. So we must thank those that are partnering with us. And as you say, women are doing and can do anything. We've got women that are in construction. We've got women that are doing things that we would not have imagined that women can do certain jobs, and they are doing it well with so much commitment, with a lot more diligence, and so on. So yes, thank you very much for being part of that initiative, which is a game changer, not just for women, but for families.
Thank you so much for your contribution. If I could move over to Dr. Hoto. Dr. Hoto, keeping with the theme of books, I don't have your book in my hand. But if I did have your book in my hand, what would be the title and what would you write about? And I'm really giving you a blank canvas here to speak about what are you most passionate about, Dr. Hoto?
Okay, thank you very much for giving me a doctorate, which I don't have. But nevertheless, if I were to write a book, I could just give you some of the research that I did in the field of mathematics, which is about incremental value. That would be my theme if I were to write a book. So it starts by knowing where you are and defining your current position before you move forward. And if I bring it into context of what we're trying to do here, it's about saying to ourselves, where is our economy? Where is our country? In the Bible, they will say that God said to Moses, what do you have? And Moses said, I have a staff. And with that staff, he did things that were unimaginable. So my sense of incremental value, which would be the theme of my book, is that in all things we do, we need to start at the right level and define the growth path diligently, slowly but surely. Because I tend to believe that we lack a foundation of who we are, where we are, and if you don't have that, we can't define the new path or where we are going. Typically, for example, Ahmed made a presentation about the Soviet Union. I took that very interestingly. Zimbabwe is not dissimilar to the situation that was in the Soviet Union soon after its collapse. We have 3 generations of people even in this room. Wamtasa or myself and others will say in Rhodesia things were like this. Then the others will say soon after independence things were so nice, we were just walking first street, we were buying houses. Then there are the young ones who say, yeah, all we know is hyperinflation. And we are all struggling to say what is Zimbabwe about because of those various perspectives. We really don't know what it is. And as a result of that, there are different thoughts. Unfortunately, in the corporate leadership, we have not had many of the younger ones coming through to think about the future. We have more of us who are thinking about the past. So when you are thinking about the past, it's like driving your car looking backwards. You wish for those things that you experienced 30 years ago, 40 years ago. But time, in terms of incremental value, the clock does not stop. The coordinates continue moving in time and space. So I think that we should be saying to ourselves, this is where we are. Let's define a new understanding of where we are. For example, the measures of who we are must be relevant today. One of my big concerns about us in Zimbabwe, in Africa, is the names we give to our business people. We call them vendors, call them informal sector. We give them all sorts of, we call them names basically. But those people are actually running businesses, creating economic dignity for themselves and others, raising families, investing, but we've not found a good name to give them. So right from the start, we are looking down upon ourselves. So if we start by looking up at ourselves and define where we are, and then define the incremental step functions to get to the destination, we'll create what he was talking about, a meeting of the minds. It's called convergence in mathematics. You need to then have a convergence towards certain objectives. So I would like to believe that when we measure, indices are very important. In the telephone business, which you are, you like to measure the number of people with mobile phones, smartphone. I saw Ketura talking about the 1 billion Africans. When we measure investment assets, premiums, and so on, we start saying it's premium income to GDP. What does that do? We are looking down upon ourselves. We don't say how many people have taken a financial product. The problem is, we are selling our policies for $2 a person. In the more developed world, by the size of the economy, they are selling their policies for $100 a person. So when you do the ratios using GDP alone to premium income, you say the insurance penetration in Nigeria is 1.6%. They say that. So it says that the premium is just the GDP is about 500 billion. Premium is about 8 billion for a big country like Nigeria. It's a pity. So we say it's underdeveloped. But if you go to the numbers of people who have taken a financial product, it's much more than that. So if we start from there and say, okay, so what is our problem? Our problem is that we are starting from a low base. What we need to do, we need an incremental value model. So the first thing we do is to involve as many people as possible, bring them in. They are paying $1 each. Get them to understand that they can pay $2, they can pay $3, they can pay $5, they can pay $10. Before you know it, you move from your 3% penetration in Zimbabwe to 10% by having an incremental value model. And then we will teach the younger generation that if you start with a big bang approach, the cost of error is too high, the capital is scarce. So rather than start a very big business, do it step by step. I like the numbers when she presented, the 416,000 customers eventually, and each one of them giving you $240 gives you $1 million in no time. 10 million actually, if you use the, I do that all the time, the numbers. So my book would be incremental value. My philosophy would be, let's not look down upon ourselves. Let's not call our key players in these economies names like vendors, informal sector, because we are saying they don't call, the definition of informal sector in Zimbabwe is actually very, very irritating to me. It says there's no formal way of knowing what they are doing. But we know what they are doing, don't we? We can't find them. They have no address, they have no bank account, they don't pay tax. But after that, we say they are 80% of the economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Otto. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, incremental value model. So I hope that the book sales, you do your pre-orders before the book is written, and I'm sure the sales just from the pre-orders will make him write the book very quickly. So there's an income model for you, Dr. Hoto. Some very interesting perspectives there, particularly on the way we see ourselves, being the way we project ourselves and the way we believe in what we can achieve. And that's a very interesting take on the Zimbabwe that we have today. If you could advise a young person today, and I noticed that you are quite involved in the University of Zimbabwe in terms of your other public profile roles that you're involved in. A young person in Zimbabwe today, if you were their coach and you were coaching them through life and through business, if you could give them one piece of advice, what would you advise them?
Thank you. It's called know yourself with skill. Be authentic. What is the problem that our youngsters face? Our children, actually. Most of them want to associate with that other guy who is not them, who is not even their family. Yes, I do, for all my sins, I do share the Invest Council of our biggest university in this country, the University of Zimbabwe. We have children. About 60% of the students come from rural secondary schools, which you again call names, we call them upper tops. That's name calling, carrying on. But they supply about 60% of the students who go into tertiary education in the country. And to Divine's point, most of them are brought up by their moms, just like me. And they actually come and outfox the children from more wealthy families because they know who they are. So if I'm to coach a young person, they must know who they are. And one of the problems we have is that when the children don't have fathers and the mothers are doing it alone, they struggle to find an identity. We have lots of that. Men are being irresponsible a lot in this country, where they, even if they don't look after the child, they must at least let them know their identity. So they must know who they are, biologically, and family, and background, so that they know where they are starting from. And they move incrementally, I'm back to my theme, from there to their destination.
Thank you very much. It was very, very, very interesting. And I think, for young people in our country today, that issue of identity is a very big issue. And the sense of self-belief in who we are as a people is something that we need to inculcate and to find ways of really distilling it in a very powerful way. So thank you for that.
Just it. We try to dissuade them from learning from the wrong role models, which is also our problem. Our social media is awash with people who flash cars, who donate cars, who do this, who do that. And for a young mind, because they are always bombarded with this social media circulation, they may end up thinking that is life. That is how you arrive. So we have got to say to them, there's no wealth that grows on trees. It's created. So our Vice Chancellor, Walter Kamba, said to us in his last graduation speech, he said to you graduates, the only place where the word success comes before work is in the dictionary. That's the only place. So you got to work first before you succeed. So we have to tell the young people, and by the way, Roy, I used to teach in the university. I still give the first lecture in actuarial science at NAST. And the issue is to say, you must work. There's no magic about it. And you are young. So if you are young, don't try to be old. Don't compete with people who are 10 years older than you. Be yourself, be of your age. And just keep your head down, straight, stay in your lane, and look at the right role models. Thank you.
So there it is, ladies and gentlemen. Wealth doesn't go on trees. I thought money was made from paper, which is trees, but obviously it's a different take, but I'm sure we all know what it means. An interesting thing that I learned today is that amongst the panel, we have someone who is called Shumba. We learned that CEOs are very adventurous people. So Shumba, could you tell us about your Zimbabwe, in rural Zimbabwe back in the day, and some of the interesting things you got up to as a young man in Zimbabwe, so that we just hear the adventurous side of you.
The adventurous side. Thank you. Yes, I feel it's a bit awkward being a foreigner and a white foreigner and a risk of appropriation. But I certainly, I was my formative career years were spent in rural Mudzi as a teacher back in the day when Zimbabwe hired young expat teachers, and I think that, and then I went on to live in Marewa for a couple of years, and spent about 5 years in total in my 20s in Zimbabwe. So that shaped, I think, those years. I mean, I hope I made some kind of contribution in the community I lived, but I certainly learned a huge amount. It shaped my career, it shaped my view of the world. Ever since, just, I guess, living in for many people, obviously, that's a normal part of life, going to a Kamusha. For me, as a youngster, living in rural Zimbabwe, experiencing a version, with all the caveats of a privileged British young man in Mudzi, but certainly gave me a set of insights into the world that I hadn't had before. And you're right, it's about adventurous spirit. I think I had a choice. Many of my peers, they leave university in Britain and they go off and they travel the world on a round-the-world ticket. I came to Mudzi, and I think it certainly taught me so much. Now, my life is slightly different today. People call me Your Excellency and I have a flag on my car. It's a bit different from taking the bus or hiking up in the emergency taxis in '92 in the Pondo Pondo, getting those emergency cabs up Enterprise Road. What was Enterprise Road is now a different name road on my way to Motoko. But certainly, I still. I think probably all do this, I guess, is you still see yourself as, I still see myself as Pete, the young man who came and was living in rural Mudzi, and I guess CEOs still see themselves as the person they were, and yet the world around you sees you as something different. And I guess that's always a challenge for me, thinking about how, we talk about coaches. I have a coach. I run a business in a way. I mean, I run a multi-million-pound embassy. But trying to find ways to get an outside-in perspective, I think, are really important. Making sure that there's challenge, and that with all the hierarchy of working in, whether you're in a big corporate or whether you're in a government department, hierarchy can filter out challenge. It can filter out external views, and really having to try hard. And I think the reason I say that is because having lived in a rural part of Zimbabwe where I could see what it looked like when government would come, and as an individual, I can see what it looked like when donors came in their fancy white Land Rovers and Land Cruisers and asked leading questions and then left. And I could feel, and then we used to joke in the bottle store afterwards about these guys who came and asked these, in their UN vehicles. Yeah. So again, making sure you hold on to, I feel that making sure I hold on to that set of insights about what you're perceived as from the outside, I guess is a key CEO, but also I think ambassadorial skill to have, because you can get carried away in the trappings of your position and your status. And if enough people call you Your Excellency, you might start believing it. So you have to make sure that you don't, you keep your feet firmly on the ground. And I'm sure that's, and I credit my time in Mudzi to a lot of that.
Yeah. No, Your Excellency, thank you for for that expert answer. Talking about, maybe just touch on your experiences in Mudzi as a young man. How do you feel that shaped the person that you've become? And what advice would you give to young people in Zimbabwe today who are looking at opportunities and what they want to do? The second part of it is, obviously, it was foundational for you to have the cultural experience of coming from the UK, spending time in Zimbabwe. How do we bring that back so that we bring a better understanding of ourselves, either Zimbabweans in the UK or people from the UK coming to Zimbabwe, and really understanding each other better? Because when we then come to interface in business or in politics, our background is a large part to play in how we view the world. So two parts of that particular question.
Yeah, thank you. I think a key part of it is, and I think this is a conversation I have with my children now, is about adaptability. And we talk about an agile world, we talk about a VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world. The skills we're going to need, the skills that our children's generations are going to be ones of how you adapt to the changes that are coming. We can't imagine, business corporates know better than me, but we can't imagine the scale and the pace of change coming. And we are all going to have to learn to adapt to that and thrive in it. And I guess the key thing for young people, wherever you are in the world, is how do you prepare yourself for that? And I certainly credit putting yourself into difficult positions, putting yourself into strange positions, exposing yourself to new experiences, being something that I would advise any young person from any country. Certainly that's what I learned the first day when my fellow teachers greeted me and pointed me to the long drop and pointed me the 3-kilometre walk to the borehole, having used to been living in rural, in Britain, where you turn on a tap and turn on a light. Now that's quite extreme, but there are comparators today, and I guess making sure that young people feel, are willing and able to, and have the confidence, and we give them the confidence to put themselves into positions that are different. And I think, young Zimbabwean going to the UK would have a similar reverse version of that. I think your point about sort of the kind of cultural connections, we are, I'm a diplomat, I'd say this, but we're closer than we often think. And it's very easy to focus on difference. And in business world, you might seek to dominate. In the diplomatic world, you seek to cooperate and collaborate. And it's very easy to compete in a way. And I think the challenges the world faces today are challenges are ones of how we find ways to cooperate, to collaborate, and not compete. And I think the basis of all that is understanding each other. And back to the first point about putting yourselves in other people's shoes, understanding the perspective of the government person opposite you, or and I think that culture is part of that, of course. But the sort of, and it comes back to that outside-in view. But putting yourself in a position where you're really focusing on understanding people. Often the biggest arguments I find are arguments, they're not about the substance of the argument, they're about not understanding each other. And that's what we have to try and focus on.
Yeah. No, it's amazing having an ambassador like yourself who's actually lived in Zimbabwe, during a certain part of your life. And I liked your Shona pronunciation, by the way. It was spot on. Well done. Yeah, so thank you very much, Ambassador. If I could move on to Ahmed. Something the ambassador said, which he said, hierarchies filter out certain views. One of the challenges that I have as a CEO is, how do I truly know what is happening? And how do I avoid people telling me what they think I want to know, as opposed to what it is that I actually need to know in running an organization? How do we avoid as CEOs living in ivory towers where our view of the world is not actually what the world looks like? And I'm sure it's a common issue, as Pete said, when so when someone calls you your excellency, it's already a barrier to you having a conversation about certain things that you may otherwise have a conversation with a friend over tea, or where you want to say certain things with a certain perspective. I'm sure it's a challenge CEOs have. What would be the way you would, how do CEOs avoid that trapping?
Yeah, it's my favorite topic, actually, because this is the question I get asked. Is it's very lonely up here. What do I do? What do I do? It's actually not that complicated. We have to build a system of accountability. I will go back to that word again. We have to build certain, whichever you want to call them, OKRs, KPIs, certain measurable indicators that are seen by all, built into whatever you want to call them, dashboards, reports, whatever. But those are just the tools. The mechanism is, like you said, the face-to-face. What rhythm are we going to build in our organization to where these things don't fall through the cracks? So we go from vision, strategy, deliverables, actions, accountability. And that rhythm that we will build together, me as a coach, and the rhythm that I built when I ran companies, is where all of those things come to the fore. And if you build that matrix of systems, things won't fall through the cracks. And we're all looking at the same things, and we're all accountable for the same things. Where things run off the rails, as they say, is when we miss those check-in points, miss the rhythm, and miss the accountability. So, just as an example, we didn't get the number. It was a difficult week last week. This account didn't pick up the phone, and he didn't order, and he didn't. You usually get answers like this, or
Yes.
the economy is bad. Well, the economy was bad when we made the plan, right? Nothing has changed.
Yeah.
Without the specificity, it would be difficult.
Yes.
So what we try to do is to bake all of that in to the, again, from the top to the bottom, from the vision to the strategy, all the way to the deliverable, and what rhythm of accountability we build in to make sure we don't drop anything. Does that make sense? Does that answer?
It does answer my question. I've got a follow-up.
Yeah.
And my follow-up is, confirm CEOs are perfect, they don't make mistakes.
Confirm CEOs are perfect and don't make mistakes?
Yes.
I can't do that.
You can't do that. I thought you would not be in a position to do that.
Yeah.
You've been a CEO, and I'm sure you've made mistakes. Tell us some of the mistakes that you've learned, the mistakes you've made. Particularly if you've got a particularly embarrassing mistake that you made. We would love to hear about it, if you're willing to share with us. And tell us how that shaped your view of being a CEO.
Well, there are so many. First days arriving in Russia. I had come out of that North Africa debacle that we talked about. So everything for me was discipline, timeliness, dedication, no BS, as they say. I didn't realize that that's how Russia was already built. Right? That's how they are, right? So we came into our first planning session to do, I guess it was 2015, to talk about roll out the plans for the entire year. So I came in, did top line stuff, and it's just crazy. And I thought I had given good marching orders, for lack of a better word, for what the expectations were, and we would come back in 2 weeks, and everybody would have their plan. This is my part, and this is what I'll do, and didn't really think that I had to be so microscopic in what to tell. Came back 2 weeks later, nothing was done. Everybody looked at me and said, well, you said you were going to do, and you didn't tell us exactly what to do. So that's not a massive failure because it's adjustable. It just leads me to understand the audience, understand the culture, understand your team, and figure out how to resonate with them, how to connect with them, how to engage them. So from a leadership perspective, that is one small example of a mistake I made. We can talk monetary mistakes for days. Money lost, margins lost, hedging that didn't work, tons of mistakes. I usually like to talk about people mistakes.
Okay, great. You know, one thing I love about coaching, and I have many sessions with Lionel, is the stories. And the ones I enjoy the most is where things didn't go well, not the ones where you made lots of money and everything worked out well and there was a great strategy, but ones where you totally missed it. And I think from a learning perspective, even from the platforms that we have sometimes, we get the people who are successful to tell us how they were successful and for this perfect picture of how things work, but actually we would learn a lot more from the stories of the things that actually didn't work. And I think in this context, I just wanted us to, at least have an idea of what didn't work for you. And I like the way that you told your presentation through stories. And stories are very powerful. And we will remember the stories. We may not remember what was on the slides, but stories are powerful as a tool of teaching. And I see you've mastered that very well. So thank you for that. James, over to you. One of the things Ahmed spoke about, you're a CEO, you've been running a business for the last, I think you said 16 years as CEO. In a very dynamic environment, Kenya has gone through its political upheavals, the economy has also gone through its ups and downs like any African economy. A critical thing that Ahmed mentioned was the right team, having the right team. And I think he asked a question in the room to say, how many of you believe your team is a 9 or 10? And there was a hesitancy in the room for people to lift up their hands and say, I truly believe my team is a 9 or 10. And then he followed it up and he says, do you believe your team will take you to the next level for the organization? Again, it's not a flurry of hands coming up immediately. So tell us a little bit more about how you have made your team the right team for the achievements that you have now achieved, what sacrifices or tough decisions you've had to make along the way, and what advice would you give to any of the CEOs in this room about how to formulate a winning team?
No, I think I'm still learning. Perhaps that's one of the areas I need coaching on 16 years later, because the most critical decision for an investor, we sit at an investment holding company level, the most critical decision you can make after the choice of the company is the choice of the CEO. That has been my experience. And if you get that wrong, because it's not easy to, it's always painful when you have to replace a CEO and you tend not to do it as quickly. It can cost you your investment. And one of the mistakes I've made is when in the past we selected a CEO based on somebody who seemed passionate, they seemed like they could do it, and it didn't work. And what I've learned at a CEO selection level, nowadays we select somebody who has done it before. So you have to really think carefully what is the challenge and problem you're trying to solve. And what we typically do is see who has been successful previously under those set of circumstances so that you can minimize the point you're talking about, risk. When you get the right leader, then you can develop a good team below them. When the leader is not right, then the team will be, the leader is the highest, sort of, if it's a number 8, then everyone else will be 8, 7, 6. It's hard to have a number 2 leader and a team that is at number 8 level. At least that has been our experience. But really the biggest driver of value for us is, in any organization, is the leadership and the quality of that leadership. At the individual company level, what we've tried to do is to develop leadership from scratch through our graduate management program. And some of the successful leaders we have joined us straight from university. And they've been with us for more than 10 years, 12 years, and we've taken them through the process. So you're sort of aligned culturally and value-wise, and therefore there is a strong sense of trust that you'll hold your end of the bargain when you're responsible for something, and there'll be minimal surprises. The challenge we faced is that there's not enough organizations doing that. So whenever these large organizations come in, they swoop and take our good people. And then you go back again from scratch and you start developing a fresh team. But I guess that's what life is all about. Yeah.
James, thank you very much. Hugo is getting a bit jealous that I'm taking his thunder here up here, so he says, please wrap it up. So Hugo, I will listen because you're far more experienced at this, but I hope that I can apply for your job soon. I'm really enjoying this, by the way, so to my team, maybe I need to find a different career path. But what I've really enjoyed about having this panel is the depth of experience that you've got up here, and the fact that this conversation could be free-flowing because people are speaking from personal experiences and really speaking from deep personal experiences and having traveled a journey over a long period of time. So the idea of a CEO being the chief mistake maker is probably the right way to see a CEO. And I think, James, you encapsulate that by saying you want somebody who's done it before. In other words, you want someone who's already paid the school fees somewhere else, so that they don't pay the school fees on your time. And that's what really James was saying, that you want the CEOs made the mistakes already so that they don't have to make it again. But thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for this really exciting panel. And I've really, as I said, enjoyed the breadth of experience, diversity as well in terms of where you are coming from in the world, and that you come and you're unshackled by some of the challenges that we have in Zimbabwe. So you bring in an out-in perspective that allows us to truly introspect on who we are. And I really like the perspective about belief, about shaping the way we see ourselves as a way to understand how we need to win. And I'll come back to dominating, that you mustn't just be in the game, you must become the game. And if we go with that sort of winning mindset to everything that we approach, then strategic agility in a dynamic environment is really possible. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being part of this panel and for taking your valuable time to be with us today. Thank you. Hugo, over to you.
Okay, we're not having another panel discussion. It's okay. Also, some people are starting to pack up and want to leave. Roy and panel, thank you very, very much. It was absolutely insightful. As we draw to a close, it's important for us to have a summary, capture some of the key messages and key learnings that we've picked up today. And please allow me to invite Lionel back onto stage to do a summary of how the day has transpired. Lionel? I think they're completely mic.
I think you shouldn't worry, I'm not going to dance, so at least you must acknowledge I know how to dance, right? Yeah. But I don't know about you guys, but I think we had an incredible day. It was a great session. Do you guys agree with me? Thank you. Thank you. I think as BPL Africa, we set out to create a forum that is not just an event. We set up to create a forum which is a catalyst to an ongoing conversation. And I think today we planted a seed around some of the things that as businesses, as individuals, we need to start thinking about, especially people from the continent. How should we think about the world that we live in today, and what does it look like tomorrow? How do we balance short-term and long-term? And how do we find help? The essence behind BPL Africa Connect is really about bringing exceptional individuals who have actually walked the path and exceptional businesses that have actually created success, and be able to use that as a forum where we have meaningful discussion so that we all learn from each other in terms of how we move forward. And I think we've been able to achieve that. And I want you also to know that this forum is actually the inaugural forum. You know, we could have chosen to do this forum in any part of Africa or even in Europe, but we decided to actually start it off in our home ground in Zimbabwe, and I think it's one of the best decisions that we ever made. So if we think about how today played out, we had an incredible session from the Deputy Minister, and I think you guys agree with me. He was very forthcoming, and there were some very direct questions that went to him, and he was able to tackle them. And I think it was a very good start of the day to really contextualize what people are thinking about and everything that's happening within the economy. And that was a very good start of our day, especially with the dialogue that we had. We then moved into my section where I started to unpack some of the realities around the opportunity that we have. And my message was clear. We have 1 billion reasons to believe in Africa. And I want to kind of come back to the point that I raised earlier on. Every morning, even from tomorrow, 16 million Zimbabweans are going to wake up, and they're going to be looking for goods and services. Whether you are there as a company to provide it or not, they will get those goods and services. Whether you show up, you don't show up, it's going to happen. People will make it happen. So it's important that we have a mindset that says, how do we become part of the game and be the first movers that actually play a role in this development that takes place? And the essence of my presentation was highlighting some key points. The center of it was really the fact that as individuals, or even as businesses, we need to embrace technology in its fullest. If you haven't embraced technology, you're already too late. But you know what they say? The best time to plant a tree is when? Now. It's 30 years later, it's 30 years before, and now. So it's never too late to actually start. So it's 30 years before or now. So I think there's no better time than now to actually start getting into the technology game. And we actually unpacked this in its fullest, and everyone can relate to it. But we talked about the sheer size of the opportunity that Africa presents. And it was very glaring that the upside is huge. And the key message around the opportunity is that in Zimbabwe, we need to stop looking just inwards. It's not to say we shouldn't win at home, but we should also look regionally. We should also look globally. And we shared some very glaring examples of businesses. You know, one of my favorite one is the one I shared where a business in Uganda, from a village in the middle of nowhere in Uganda, was able to land on the shelves of Tesco's and Sainsbury in the United Kingdom. And we saw it playing out in different businesses that we actually shared. And I actually unpacked what I call the secret sauce. And this secret sauce gave you all those 4 pointers that you all should take away with you as you move forward. But what is the key message that I was sending to you? The key message is one: you guys can do it, it can be done. And again, if you don't do it, somebody else is actually going to do that. So this was a start of a conversation around painting a picture about the opportunity that we have on the African continent. Later on, we actually had incredible presentations that we actually unpacked to us. We had James Moira, Dr. James Moira, who came up on stage and did an excellent job in unpacking how this investment company, I like the thesis around Centum. They say we build businesses to sell. So from day one, when they build a business, they actually build it in a way that they actually want to sell it. And there's a lot of key learnings that he actually unpacked, and I'm sure that was beneficial to you. But you know, one of the things that we want to make sure is that this is not just a meeting. We're walking away with key takeaways. What was the key takeaway for me? from Mr. James Moria's presentation, outside of the insights that he gave us. There's a platform called TRIFIC, which is a special economic zone that's in Nairobi. This is something that as businesses in Zimbabwe, we should embrace. I encourage you to reach out to Dr. James Moria. You've got pamphlets on your desks. You guys should take that away. If you don't have enough, we've got plenty more. But the details, the contact details are there. Regional expansion is not a Zimbabwean company going to Zambia, period. No. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying do it, it's important. I'm saying, hey, go to Malawi, it's important. Those are great markets, but the world is much bigger. And TRIFIC gives you a landing pad to do that. That's a key takeaway that you need to take with you. Get out of Dr. James Moria, get to understand about TRIFIC, and get on the bandwagon and do that. Later on, we then had my very good friend Ahmed Hassan, who came up here and packed a very compelling story. And it was very kind of you to open yourself to us on your personal journey, but that was fairly compelling. But the message from Ahmed is really around the power of coaching. Each and every one of us need to have coach. Footballers have coaches. Prime ministers have coaches. Presidents have coaches. All the key people have coaches. How do you then surround yourself with people that allow you to move forward? Again, CEO coaching is available and they're accessible. Those of you who want to reach out to Ahmed, please do. In fact, Ahmed has actually said something to me. He has said to me, anyone who reaches out to him, they'll get a free coaching session from CEO Coaching International. And it also comes with a very good book, which is called Big Happening, which is Make Big Happening. It's an exceptional book. So any of you who sign up with Ahmed, they'll get the free session of coaching from Ahmed, and then they'll also get access to the book. But it's not about getting the book, right? But it's really about you kind of reaching out to individuals that can help you on your journey, and that's an important conversation. One of the other inspiring conversation was from this young lady who stood here and delivered a compelling presentation in Ketura, all the way from Lagos, her first time. She's still excited about our airport, and hey, we should brag about it, It's a lovely airport. But Ketura actually did an exceptional job in really showcasing the power behind creating a business that can outlive, that is a future-proof business. At her age, as an incredible human being, and you could tell that she's an incredible individual. If that in itself is not inspiring you of what she's been able to build and the vision and the future of what she wants to build, there's no other takeaway that you can get from that. But the key message coming out of Ketura is that she's open for business. She's saying she's looking for strategic partners, be it with banks, be it with insurance, be it with whatever. And quite frankly, if I'm a lady, if I was sitting in the room, I'll reach out to Ketura and just to get to understand her journey. Because I think it's really inspiring to see more Keturas, kind of coming up. So there's a lot to actually come out of that from Ketura. But what's even more important is that we then went into the panel discussion. And the panel discussion, you must agree with me, was very compelling. The conversation was very casual, but very on point, and there were some very serious nuggets that actually came out. And it's actually a true honor to have such an incredible panelist that actually shared some of those nuggets with us. And I'm sure you guys had a lot to take away. And I'm sure everybody's open to sharing some of those learnings even beyond that meeting. But I think the most important thing is that let's understand we've planted a seed, and it's a journey. And hopefully we'll be back again in Harare with another group of panelists and speakers, and we'll be able to take this to the next level. So in closing, I just want to do a couple of things. I want to give a vote of thanks to First Capital Bank. I don't know if Emily is here or anyone from First Capital. I know Tapera, the CEO, was here. But I just want to thank you guys from First Capital for making this event happen. I think you guys played a very incredible role. If we can please give them a round of applause for doing what they did. Yeah, thank you, First Capital. I also want to thank our good friends in Econet for actually, also making this event happen. And they've been exceptional. And we just want to thank Econet again in Roy and the team. Yeah. We also want to thank the rest of our sponsors in Baker Tilly, Fingas, who have also played a fairly incredible role. Who've also played a role in making this happen. But most importantly, I also want to thank our panelists. Ambassador, thank you very much for coming. I know you've got a very busy schedule, but we really appreciate you taking time to come out here. And my very good friend and big brother, Mr. Douglas Hoto, incredible human being. I've gotten to know him for a long time, and thank you for coming and spending the entire day with us and sharing some of your key learnings. We really appreciate it. And please, a hand of applause for, yes. And my favorite, Dr. Divine, I don't know how to thank you. You know, you inspire me. You inspire a lot of young people on social media. I think Dr. Divine is incredible. She is tech savvy at another level. I mean, you should follow her on her page. She's an incredible human being. And I also encourage you to read her book. She's an exceptional human being, and she inspires a lot of young women across the continent and also in Zimbabwe. But we just want to thank you for coming and spending the day with us. We really appreciate that. I also want to thank our host. He's a sophisticated host, right? And, you know, I call him gangster. You know, you should see how he walks and how he talks. But he's an incredible human being. Hugo, thank you for making this happen. Thank you. Yeah. I just want to thank two other incredible human beings, three human beings. I think there's lots of them. And I'm going to miss some of the names, but I'm going to call out the main ones. There is Munya and Victoria and Dorothy behind the scenes, and Rose and Uncommon, who played an incredible role in organizing this. And when I say organizing this, they had to put up with my impatience and my persistence and my quality checks. But I just want to thank you for organizing this venue and making it to what it is. Thank you very much, team. Yeah. And I'm sorry if I missed out anybody. But I also want to thank you guys for coming in, for putting up with us for the entire day. This has been really exceptional, and this was beneficial for you, and looking forward to engaging with you in the future. But thank you very much, and have a lovely evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for Lionel one more time. All right, before we dispatch, I'm looking for 5 volunteers. Can I have 5 volunteers, please? Please come up. Looking for 5. I'm looking for another 4 volunteers. Thank you very much, Vacchi. I'm looking for 3 more volunteers. I think I've got my 5. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1 more. Are you coming? Yeah, you coming? That's 5. Okay. Where are the mops, guys? Munya, please come up. Courtesy of BPL and Queen D, or Dr. Lukula, please read with joy. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seats. How simple was that? Actually, please come back. They'd like to take a picture. We'd like to have a picture. So if you'd like to come up on stage, please come up on stage. Yeah.